Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
So now we are in 2023, and one of the things that I'm not a New Year's resolution guy, just because
never have been.
It's cliche.
Yep.
It's not my thing. But I do try to say, okay, these are some things I want to work on.
Yeah,
not
that's
setting
fair.
a firm goal.
Right.
But one of the things I want to work on is more time for gaming itself, which is one of the reasons we've talked about doing some adjustments to our schedule.
Yep.
And I find that I'm finding it more interesting reading up more on a duet type of gaming.
Right.
I just picked up that book about the solo gamer that came out from Modiphius.
Yep.
And there's stuff in that book that's interesting that could be used if you're going to do duet gaming.
Absolutely.
And the idea of, I don't know if you encountered this when you would, you are really well organized, and I'm not making fun. I'm saying this seriously.
Not yet.
You're really well organized, and you organize well when you prepped to GM us when we played Star Wars Age of the Empire.
Sure.
I like to be that way, but I'm not always that way, and then I fall into a mud hole because I'm never as prepared as I want to be to game. And then I set myself up for being disappointed with how I play.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was thinking about, and it's a good time to do it because we're going to be talking with someone about this tonight.
That's just so happens.
What are some ways to make it easier to GM?
Well, I appreciate the observation in terms of prepping for you and Brian back when, but the reality is a lot of the times I've GM'd like for my daughters and their cousins, that type of thing. Even some of the stuff like you and I did subsequently, obviously, as we've talked about, it's been infrequent in both directions, but there really were a lot of times where I was, to my thinking, not adequately prepared. I had a bit of backstory from the last session, and I'd maybe spent 15 or 20 minutes putzing around with characters, NPCs specifically, with some connections, just general ideas, maybe grabbed a few JPEGs online that I could use to share. Honestly, Brad, that session that I prepped for you two several years ago now is without question the most prepared I've ever been to GM anything.
Yeah, but even still, like you said, I mean, even when you're saying you didn't do a ton of prep is prep. And both of us like stretching our creative abilities.
Yep.
And so doing this is an exercise not only in just entertainment, but it's also correct me if I'm wrong, it's really in effect an intellectual exercise as well, even though it is for a activity. One of the first things I did when we started looking at doing this a number of years ago, I was looking for ways to make it easier for me because I had never mastered. I never GM'd the game.
Right.
Neither did you. When we were
not up. Before. No, never.
No. And I started looking online, and that's when I found D&D Duet.
Yep.
Jonathan and Beth Ball's website. And then I started looking at Amazon because who doesn't look there?
It's
I
a
found these.
problem.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's a problem. Yeah.
You ain't kidding. Just remind me when we're done here recording. I'm going to show you a couple pictures of some things from Amazon.
Man.
But I was so interested when I started finding Jeff Ashworth's book.
Yep.
Which we talked with him in the past about.
Great guest and beautiful books that now have spun off with Media Lab into an entire series beyond just Jeff's work.
Yes. And then material that I saw was like random tables. How do you this
Yeah.
idea of random tables.
How does that work?
Yeah, and it harkens back to the Choose Your Own Adventure days. Remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books?
Oh, very well.
It reminds me of rolling and picking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
helping me to develop campaigns or one-shot stories that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a long time, I've had, I picked up a number of these random table books, but
Yep,
for a long
I
time,
remember.
I think I've talked to you about having Matt Davids on.
Who is the author of a bunch of those books that you picked up right from the beginning.
Yeah, including the No Prep Game Master.
Yep. Great little
neat,
book.
Neat little book that's
Yep.
really affordable on Amazon. No Prep Game Master.
I think what I looked at it a couple days ago, and it was like, don't quote me, but it was like $8 or something. It was like inexcusable not to buy it. It's just so readable, and I mean, well, as you'll hear in our upcoming podcast, our upcoming interview, it definitely got me thinking. I think it got you thinking too.
Yeah, it was. We'll talk with him about that.
Mhm.
But he also, not only did he develop these materials, but he's developed the Anarchy
man.
RPG.
Yep.
And he writes even outside of this, and he's still actively gaming.
Yep, he's an active author, and he started that little company. What's that called again? Dice Geeks.
Oh shoot! You were staring at me. I thought you.
No, I was kidding. I
thought there was a. I was waiting for the punchline.
Oh no, there was no punchline.
Okay.
Literally, right? He started this blog and this full company,
Yeah.
and it's very high profile. I mean, who really hasn't encountered Dice Geeks in the RPG world online?
Yeah, dicegeeks.com. If you're
Yeah.
interested in his material,
Yeah.
you can go out there and see the books. You can go on Amazon, but he has a list of his materials. He has the new novel he released out there in terms of information.
And it
so on.
turns out, and I mean, I know we say this about a lot of our guests because it's been true, but Matt really is the nicest guy.
Oh, he is.
Just a pleasure with him to talk.
And when you listen to him, I guess we're talking now as if, I guess we're not talking like we have an interview. Is that what we're doing?
Well, we have interviewed him now.
Yeah,
Yes,
I know, but I thought we were
okay.
pretending we weren't.
Catch up, Brad. Catch up.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, people. We're working on a new
I
format.
have to pretend that I'm talking on the day of release, but I don't have to pretend that we have an interview.
Right, because real podcasts with any production value record their interviews ahead of time,
which is
we
why
always have.
Yeah, which is why I am on no other podcast than this one.
Yeah, that's why. Let's go with that. Okay.
But no. He is truly, as you talk to him, one of the first things that came to mind is he's truly an ambassador for tabletop games.
That's a really good way to put it.
If you listen to him, you can hear the passion in how he talks about it in times of his gaming. And in fact, you saw this in the acknowledgments or the inside the book of this novel.
Oh, that's so good.
To my 6-year-old self.
Sorry it took so long. We're paraphrasing. And I saw that. I thought, oh man, that so resonates. That so resonates.
Yeah. So I mean, just a really nice guy. Great interview. There's some really good material that we'll talk about afterwards.
Yeah.
And a real ambassador for the game. Not that everyone he is truly like our other guests, where you come out of that thinking, one, and two, you come out of a chat like that wanting to game.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's so true. We ended the call and it's like, oh man, I wish we had time tonight to game, to just let's get into it and let's use some of Matt's tables, some of Matt's books. Yeah. Well, I think with that, it's a good point to hop on over to our interview with Matt Davids. Matt Davids is a writer, a creator of tabletop role-playing game resource books, a novelist, a podcast host, and a former filmmaker. He is the author of the Amazon bestsellers, The Book of Random Tables, and The Book of Random Tables Quests. His first novel, The Spaceport Gambit, was released in June 2021. He lives in Missouri with his wife and their 4 children. His bookshelves groan under the weight of classic literature, science fiction, and fantasy. He enjoys playing Dungeons and Dragons, studying cinema and philosophy, and knows more about 80s post-apocalyptic movies than any reasonable person should.
So we were talking right before we hit the record button about my addiction to finding ways to make things as a new DM easier. And so when I first started searching online, I found a book called The No Prep Game Master. And then I found Random Tables books. And then I found a website. And then I found Matt Davids. And Matt's been able to, well, I found the books before we know who Matt was. But Matt, thanks for taking the time. This has been one I've been wanting to talk with you for a while, just because of how important your material's been for me to learn as a gamer.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation to come and talk with you guys.
Yeah. And just to clarify that, when Brad says, Matt, that he's wanted to talk to you for a while, like literally since we started recording our first episodes almost 2 years ago, your name has been coming up almost from day one.
Thanks for taking it way over the line past creepy.
But true.
No, but yeah, seriously, just because Jason and I we both are numbers guys, and we work in data in certain different realms. And so the idea of working with tables and things like that, just to allow, then that allows us to unleash kind of the creativity in other areas. Is really cool. So I got to ask, because obviously if you go out to MattDavids.com, we'll have all this information in the show notes, and you can see all your writing and all the material you've worked on, podcasts and so on. How did you, let's go back to like the after the womb and everything. How did you get into gaming in itself? I don't want to go all the way back to the beginning of time. I'm talking about just gaming. Jason's giving me a funny look.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, I was introduced to gaming a lot of guys my age. It was Dungeons and Dragons. I was like 9 years old. It was 1982 or 1983. My older brother, his buddy, was like had Dungeons and Dragons or something like that, and we were going over to his house, and they said, "Hey, we're going to play the greatest game ever." And I was just like, "Well, that sounds good to me. I don't know. I don't have no idea what it is." And seriously, they gave me a pre-gen character, and seriously, I was hooked instantly, right? Wow. Like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know what it is about the tabletop role-playing game, kind of specifically Dungeons and Dragons, that it just hooked me. Like I was built to play that, right? Like it was just, the hooks were in instantly. And I went right home and started trying to, make characters or, roll up dungeons. And like the next day I ran my mom through a dungeon. She had no idea what I was doing, or anything like that. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just remembered it was something like you roll a 14 and hit. I don't even know what those rules were, and I didn't have a 20-sided dice, of course. So I wrote all the numbers on a scrap of paper, right, and tore them up and put them in a bag or a hat or something, whatever it was, and pulled out the numbers. And so yeah, it was just right there. I mean, I was just into it like instantly. And so did that for a long time. But we can kind of, I never played by the rules, right? Because I really couldn't digest some of the rules even when I started getting some of the books and that. But it was still a ton of fun. But yeah, we can follow up on that. So that was the beginning way back when.
Yeah, it sounds to me like we come from kind of the same generation, because I was around the same age in the same time period, like Jason.
Well, we're all rocking approximately the same amount of gray, so I'm going to imagine that we're not too far away from each other.
Yeah,
probably
Gen X.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you end up? So now, obviously, gaming's in your DNA. How did that kind of cross with writing? And I know you even have done work in the
writing,
video
podcasting,
well,
screenwriting, filmmaking. Pretty diverse.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was just that something with that desire to tell stories, I guess, with Dungeons and Dragons, and it just touched in me, and really, it really inspired me to kind of go on. And so, yeah, when I just wanted to tell stories, I wanted to entertain people. Of course, I became the dungeon master right away. I became a game master for a number of groups because especially back then, not a lot of people had heard of role-playing games, and so I had some of the books and I said, hey, do you want to play a game? Well, then I'm the dungeon master or I'm the game master. So just that desire to tell stories, I guess. So yeah, then when I went to college, I was just like, I want to keep telling stories, so I went into screenwriting and some filmmaking, and I did some of that. Usually it's a little bit of a sad story, but in some cases, but I wanted to do some things in that, and so it became kind of hard to put food on the table doing that. So I looked around and switched kind of things up, and I did some other things for a while, but really started working on websites. But I mean, you ask about writing was kind of always there, right? It was just always in the background. Even though I have quite a few learning disabilities, I always wanted to write. I wanted to tell people, I wanted to tell stories for people. I wanted to entertain people. I wanted to share ideas and create worlds and stuff. So that was just kind of just an outpouring of all of that. And that's, of course, what led me into creating Dice Geeks eventually, even though it took a while.
You actually beat me to that, and because this is so fascinating, I just want to read this from the Dice Geeks site. Think of Dice Geeks as the last inn before the wilderness or the first spaceport after a long jump. I mean, you already have me, right? That's awesome. So what was the genesis of Dice Geeks? I mean, that's very well known. It's another kind of thing. I mean, that's a far cry from a random table.
Yeah, like the website Dice Geeks.
Yeah.
And my company, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
the genesis behind all of that, really, it really came out of well, of course, my love of tabletop role-playing games. So I had been playing for a while, and different games. I had left Dungeons and Dragons for a while, played a lot of West End Star Wars, played a lot of that game, played some Palladium games and stuff along the way, and some different stuff. But really, I was it was one of these things where I was working at a company. I was doing website stuff, and I was getting to kind of to the point of something like, am I really doing what I'm interested in? Is this really what I would like to do? Am I going to be here for 20 years doing these things? And I just really started thinking about some of that, and I really kind of challenged myself and kind of pushed myself back to, is like, what are some of my core interests? And I was just like, well, I love film and television, I love novels and stuff, but one of my first love was tabletop role-playing games. So when I kind of arrived at that, I was like, okay, I want to do something with tabletop role-playing games. And I started looking into kind of different ways to do some of those things. And really, it's I don't want to get too heavy here or anything necessarily for your audience, but
not at all.
It was about 2013, I guess. Some of these things that brought on some of these thoughts, right? In 2013, my dad passed away. 2014, a close friend of mine who had played role-playing games with me a lot, he had passed away. And when I was at his funeral, he play tested a game called Anarchy with me when it was a D10 system way back in the day, and he played a lot. And so at his funeral, I met, I was seeing people I hadn't seen in 20 years, right? And I met some other friends who had played with us in the group, and there was a question from like 4 or 5 people. They were like, what did you ever do with Anarchy?
Wow.
And I was just like, I didn't finish it, and I put it in a drawer or on a computer thing, somewhere, and just left it. And, thinking about, mortality and thinking about that and thinking about, my job and stuff, I was just like, okay, I'm going to publish Anarchy, and I'll write Shane's name in it, and I'll dedicate it to Shane. And, and that I thought might be it, but I kind of went through the process. It took me a long time to figure out. I pulled out some of the stuff. I pulled out some folders and some computer files, and I was like, nobody could run this game except for me. So that doesn't work when you try to sell something. So, I kind of started looking around the internet, and this is when I started discovering some things. And I discovered that the D6 system that West End used was dropped into the Open D6 system under the OGL, which could be used by somebody. So I grabbed those rules because I know them by heart, and I threw Anarchy into that system. It took me like a year or more. So it was like the end of 2015, I released it. And I had one of those experiences where, I released the game and I made like $50, that first month. And it doesn't seem earth shattering or anything, but I was just like, this is what I love, right? I was like, I love role-playing games, and people bought it, and I got some feedback like, oh man, this is really cool, and just a little feedback. And I was like, I wonder if I could make this work. I wonder if I could do something with this. And so just from kind of that point, then I started thinking about, what do dungeon masters, what do game masters want? What do I need? What kind of products could I make? Because, like I said, I had been running games, since I was 9. I had gotten a lot of feedback over the years that my games were fun. And so I was just like, okay, well, what can I create that would give people joy, and also maybe, make me some money here or there? And it turned into something that I hadn't really expected, because, it's now my full-time job. So that's what I do full-time.
Okay, so speaking of bringing people joy and writing and whatnot, could you please tell us a little bit about the Spaceport Gambit?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, the Spaceport Gambit is my first novel that I released in 2021. That was another project that kind of came out. I had the idea of, I don't know, probably around 2000 or something, like years ago.
Yeah.
And kind of one of those things where, the pandemic had just been going kind of on at that point. And it was just another one of those moments where I was just like, I've always wanted to write a novel. Why don't I write one? And so I really put my mind to it, wrote the Spaceport Gambit, and put it out. And it's kind of a space opera with some corporate corporate backstabbing and things in there, but in a far future, with a wide cast of characters and that who are kind of growing tired of their corporate jobs and looking to start kind of afresh and start their own thing. And it's kind of some themes that I was working with. So.
I was gonna say, yeah. So, and I noticed it's book 1.
Yeah.
So presumably, there will be more.
There should be more. I have about 90% of the second book kind of in rough draft form.
Okay.
Actually, I have it on my agenda here for the early part of 2023 to really get it into shape and see about getting the second book out. So yeah, so hopefully it will be at least 3 books, and it'll tell a nice story of Gwendolyn Shepherd Davis and her intrepid crew and her staff, who are rebuilding an abandoned spaceport that's called Redcliffe on a far-flung planet.
Very cool. It's again, there's just you've done.
I think I could use the term
much.
prolific pretty safely here, just because of all the material that you're looking at. Obviously, your tables books, then you have your novel, and you're available for speaking, podcasts, your writing. I think you even mentioned, hopefully I'm not stepping out of bounds here. I think you said you have about 16 different projects going. Did I have that right when we were talking?
That's what I heard
early on. At least. I have a number of books, a number of more random table books that I want to get out. I have another a novel that is not connected to the Spaceport Gambit that I can't really talked too much about
Oh,
yet.
of course.
So
Yeah.
hopefully that will appear at some point. But yeah, I have a lot of role-playing game books that I want to get out. Also, my game that I originally released as a campaign setting for 5e, which is called Realms of Understreet. I want to take that and put it in its own system. So that is something that's on the horizon.
Wow.
Since you went there to 5e, and this I bring this up, and we can go as far or as not as you would be comfortable doing, but especially with all the random table work and whatnot. So as we're recording this, something that's very hot in the like social media verse, and especially the Twitter verse, is the little bit of news and the lots of people commenting on Wizards of the Coast and the coming change to the D&D OGL. And I'm curious, as a creator, as someone who lives in and well beyond that world, you've seen a lot, you've done a lot. What's your thinking about that? Like you mentioned the using the D6 system, which I mean I love. I cut my teeth. For the first like 20 years of RPGing, I didn't really know there was more than the West End Star Wars, and I was completely content. But I'm curious what you think about just OGLs in general, the little bit of scuttlebutt we've heard about what Wizards might be doing, and what that means for a creator like you, given what you do.
Yeah, and that is really interesting. I've been trying to find out what's going on myself. Fortunately, the only title that I have really released under the OGL is Realms of Understreet. Now, it is interesting with Anarchy. They used the OpenD6 system used the original OGL, I believe, from Wizards of the Coast. So I don't know how Anarchy or what that will be affected by, but Realms of Understreet should be affected by some of those new changes. So effectively, what I'm going to probably have to do is take Realms of Understreet as it is now off the market and release it as its own system, because and like, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know what they're doing or whatever, and I have no bones to pick with them. I mean, they can do a lot of what they want to do,
right.
And all that. So there is a clause in there that says something like, if you release under the OGL, they can claim ownership of it. And so, Realms of Understreet, I created that, right? That's my trademark. That's my IP. And I don't want even a hint of the possibility of losing that world, because I created that world in 1999. And so I don't even want the possibility of losing that world. So I'm going to, take it down, and I will rework it and release it with some rules that aren't somebody's property or anything like that, and so it can be back out there. But yeah, I don't I don't, since obviously I'm not a lawyer, and my random table books aren't released under the OGL because there is no Dungeons and Dragons content in them. They can be used for Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Tunnels and Trolls, 13th Age. They can be used for any fantasy RPG, and that was very intentional, because I didn't want to, at the time, to release a lot of projects under the OGL. And the only main reason is because I'm not a lawyer. And, I read through the original one, and I was just like, okay, I get the main idea, but I could have been missing something. So that's why I wanted to make sure I released, the lion's share of my books without, using the OGL.
Smart. It makes sense.
Have you heard from folks that use your books that it isn't necessarily confined to D&D? Because in all honesty, when I first found them, it was under the context of Jason and I doing some potential gaming and Pathfinder, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
So I have to imagine you're able to paint a broader swath in terms of people who would use the material.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, my intention really going forward is just like, I totally understand that, Dungeons and Dragons is, probably 98% of the hobby. So I totally understand that. But I wanted to make something that anybody could use. I wanted to make something that if you're running D&D, if you're running Pathfinder, if you're running, 13th Age, if you're running whatever, you can use that. And then the same with not only the fantasy books, but with the cyberpunk books. If you're running Cyberpunk Red, great. But if you're running a Powered by the Apocalypse cyberpunk game, you can use the tables as well. Or the modern book, if you're doing a D20 modern, or if you're doing mutants and masterminds, or if you're doing whatever you're playing, you can use my books for whatever. And so that was very intentional, that that people could get as much enjoyment out of them, no matter what systems, or the science fiction books. I wanted people who were playing Star Trek, Star Wars, any variations of those. I wanted them to be able to use those, or if you're playing Traveler or whatever, to be able to use those same books. And so that was very intentional, just because I didn't want to limit the books to one system.
Just out of curiosity, because you were kind of listing off obviously a number of systems, and we talked a little bit about a couple before we hit record. Jason and I are kind of nerds when it comes to dice mechanics, so we could go down a rabbit hole on that, and I won't waste your time by going too far. But do you have, even outside of like the D20 mechanic, obviously, which is where all of us spend a lot of time, any others you're a fan of or are fond of, just from your experience in writing the books and the material that you've written?
Yeah. I mean, there's, obviously there's quite a few, but I mean, we've already touched on one, the old West End Star Wars D6 system. Oh my gosh. That was, I don't know when I discovered that book. I believe it was like 1987. I got my first printing book right over here. I saw it in the store. It was probably only a few weeks or something after it came out, and I just lunged at the bookshelf, because I just never knew it was coming out or anything. And I grabbed that thing, and when I got it home and I read, the rules, it just was like, oh, I can just grab these dice, roll 6 sides, and then we're good. And so I just loved that system. As for a newer system to come a little bit closer to present than 1987, the Starforge, the Iron Sworn Starforge mechanics, when I stumbled across that and read those mechanics, I was just like, I was just kind of taken by those, because, rolling the 2 10-sided dice plus, a 6-sided dice plus a modifier, it just creates your difficulty number right there. And it creates, the success or failure, or success and failures with complications right there on the dice. I thought that was fantastic. And so, I love a lot of different mechanics. I'm very fond also of percentile dice systems. So, we can go way back to the FASA Star Trek system, the old percentile system they use there. I loved that system, and I have modded that system to I don't know to what. I made up things so you could get medals, and everything on Star Trek. Like if it was in the show, I modded that system to be able to accommodate some of those things, because right, I mean, you're watching the episode Court Martial, Kirk has medals. You're watching Measure of Man, Data has medals. Well, there's no medals, so I have to make a medal chart and give you percentages so you can win medals on your different tours. And
that's cool.
So, and then you have previous tours, right? Because it's a life path system. Well, what ships did you serve on? What's their name? I mean, come on, you've got to know what the name of your ship was that you served on, if you served on the Potemkin or you served on the Poseidon, but right, because the game master can use those and pull those in, right? The first officer, now on, the Enterprise, whatever, the Enterprise I, or whatever you're playing with in the future. The first officer, the game master can drop something and have a mystery, and you could say the first officer could be like, oh, that happened 7 years ago. I was actually the chief engineer on the Poseidon.
That's cool.
6 years ago when that happened. And that can be a clue to just drop into it. So I modded that system like crazy and added all kinds of stuff to it, and had a ton of fun with that. But sorry, you mentioned Star Trek. I warned you before we started. Started recording that once I start talking about Star Trek, I can't stop. So
we've joked about maybe we should just become a Star Trek podcast because it would save so much effort trying to redirect ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and on my podcast, I just released a huge discussion of Star Trek: The Next Generation with
I saw that.
Guest. Yeah, it's in multiple parts. I think still a couple more parts are coming. And
wow.
Because I had interviewed my guest, who was Ryan McHarg, who is a game designer and a podcast host, and we had derailed the episode on a discussion of Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 3. And so I was just like, hey, why don't you come back on and we'll just talk about next gen. And so he came back on and we talked. I think the total time ended up being, I think it was over 5 hours.
That's
so
great.
I divided it up into a whole bunch of different episodes.
Oh, well, that's good. That's helpful. Thank you. So since we're here in Star Trek, I'm curious what you think. I mean, you're obviously a TNG guy, right?
Mm-hmm. I love the original series as well.
Yes, but no, I don't think it has to be mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. I will always be TNG for better and worse, definitely for better. Yeah. But I'm curious what you think about some of the newer shows, the storytelling, the plot lines, things like that. Discovery, Strange New Worlds. There's like it's like the new golden age of Trek right now. It's inconceivable to me now, looking back to 87 when TNG came out, and how incredible that was at the time as a barely teenager. How could there be this much new Trek now with these production values and these writers? So I'm a little biased, but I'm curious what you think about it through your lens.
Yeah, and that's hard for me actually to talk about because I have not seen much of the new Trek. Just because you keep talking about how prolific I am with my writing. It's just I don't have a lot of time to watch TV. I don't have a lot of time to watch some shows. So I have not seen any of Strange New Worlds. I watched the first, I think, episode of Discovery when way back when it first came out. And then my wife and I watched the first season of Picard. We haven't watched the second season, but I have mixed feelings about it. I think, and like I said, I can't talk about some of the newer shows or some of the other ones or the animated shows. I haven't seen any of the animated shows. And I think it's a mixed bag, right? I mean, obviously, the production values are off the charts, right? Yeah. I mean, I can't even. Some of the effects and stuff that they're able to pull off, it just blows me away. And then you got Michelle Yeoh, so I'm usually if she's in it, I just say it's good, or I give it a check mark up if you got Michelle Yeoh in your show or your movie, because I'm a huge fan of her, from the 90s and the early 2000s when she was burning up the Hong Kong cinema, kind of thing. So huge fan there. But I do have some reservations about some of the storytelling. Kind of the biggest with Picard is the one I could talk about the most in the first season of Picard. I have some reservations just because of the way I don't know, just the way of certain characters are handled, and I think this was also a problem that I saw in the newer Star Wars movies, like the Force Awakens and The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. And it's just that the idea, say, of Picard kind of being broken down and a lonely old man kind of thing, or from the Star Wars, sequels. It's just like Luke is a broken man, Han's a broken man. They're all just, to me, right? They have, obviously what the writers are trying to do, they're trying to give them an arc, right? They're trying to give them a character arc. So I totally understand that. But my problem with that is that they've already had their character arcs, right? Like Luke already had his character arc. Han was the smuggler who would shoot Greedo first. And he was, he was that, but then he was going to become a stable, respectable general and husband and father and things like that. But then we find out he's actually broken and he ran off and stuff like that. And the same kind of with Picard, right? We saw Picard as a professional and all of these things and respected, and then they're just not anymore. And I don't, it's like I and not even that I'm qualified to do this, right? Because nobody's hiring me to write their TV show or anything. But to me, it just, I don't know. It just seems like they're looking for that arc in some place where they don't need it, right? And
that's fair.
And some of the, like I said, some of the effects and some of the things, I'm just amazed. I am kind of looking forward to the third season of Picard because everybody's back. So I'm gonna try to watch the second season here, and then hopefully see the third season. So I want to see what they do with some of the characters. And I think one of the issues too, right, is that like some of these franchises, especially like Star Trek, right, the fans, right, and I'm including myself, right, I've been imagining, right, like I was imagining what Picard would have done after he's moved on from the Enterprise for a long time. So in my imagination, right, what can you make actually that's better than what I've imagined? Because I just think it's, I think it's great, right? I do kind of, I don't know, I do kind of lament kind of the loss of the professionalism, right? That Picard was a professional, that the Starfleet are professionals at what they do. They seem to have kind of gone into more of the bickering and arguing kind of side of things, which I think, and I understand. I've read all the stuff the writers say, oh well, it's easier to write people who are yell at each other and stuff. And I get that, but I don't get to make my job easier when it gets hard. So I would like to see, professional people who have good intentions working to solve external mysteries and challenges, rather than have just people, yell and bicker at each other all the time.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, I'm happy to watch any Trek within reason that comes out. It's some has been better than others. I thought Picard season 1 was it great? There were great episodes. It was definitely very good to me. Season 2, I'd be curious what you think of that when you watch it. Beautifully acted, beautifully done, but not necessary as a story. And then when it comes out after the fact that, well, it took place in the past in LA because they could afford that. It's like, okay, that's what you're saying, right? Then don't do that. We can wait. We've waited for 20 years. I'm good waiting another few more years if you want to do this right. So fingers crossed for season 3. I will say, Strange New Worlds, Matt, real surprise to me. Already after the first season, as a diehard TNG person, it is a close second to TNG. What they've accomplished with the storytelling is just, and the acting and everything. It's just, I think it's some of the best Trek ever made.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, I have not got to see any, so I'll put it on the list.
16 projects from now, you need to take a break. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got to ask before, because we've kept you long, and I appreciate it. Before we wrap up, so obviously TV has been sacrificed in the name of work and everything. Do you ever have time to game, or are you?
Yeah. Actually, it's been awesome the last few years because the popularity of 5e I know so many people who are who are a lot younger than I am, who are in their 30s and 20s, and even late teens who want a game, and they're willing to game with like anybody because it's a game and they're ready to go. And so, yeah, we have a game every Tuesday night. We usually do 5e. One of the perks also is that I have been taking a break from game mastering.
Nice.
That I used to just run constantly, but now everybody's kind of chipping in, and they want to run a lot of campaigns and things like that. So I've really only been GMing when I want to and when I have a good idea for a campaign. So that's been nice. So I've been getting to play quite a bit and having a lot of fun with that. So we play every Tuesday night, and then occasionally we'll try to put together a different, maybe a session here or there where we can play a different game or something like that. So I can kind of see some other systems. But yeah, mainly it's been 5e the last few years, but I really enjoy playing D&D actually according to the rules, because like I said, when I was a kid, there were, the rules were made up at my whim because I was usually the dungeon master. And
that's great.
So yeah, I've been having a lot of fun gaming with that. And then my wife and kids will play some video game while I'm role playing with my with my friends. And it's awesome. It's been a lot, but I think talking about golden ages, you were talking about the golden age of Trek. Well, we're in possibly the second golden age of role-playing games, right?
Absolutely.
The popularity of 5e has just raised all the awareness of so many other games. I mean, it should, right? I mean, 5e is great, and it reinvigorated the hobby, and just opened it up. And of course the internet with all the shows and YouTube videos and tutorials, people can learn all about role-playing games. And of course, guys like our age now are making TV shows and writing, and so they put references to Dungeons and Dragons, because that's what they were doing in the early and mid 80s and all that. So it's just increased the popularity so much. It's just been awesome. And so it was really I guess fortunate to really start Dice Geeks ramping up right when
so cool.
The popularity of Dungeons and Dragons was exploding. Because I was barely aware of 5e, in 2014 or 2015. And then I kind of became more aware of it in 2015 and asked my group if they wanted to play, and everybody was in. And and it was just like it just started exploding, and everybody was playing. And I meet people now all the time, and they're like, oh, my daughter plays, oh, my son plays, oh, we used to play back in college and we're trying to play again. And I'm just meeting people all the time doing that. And so
that's great.
I mean, it's just amazing. But yeah, I mean, we can, and if we want to talk more about the random tables or whatever, I'm game. I have some time here.
I appreciate that, because I was meaning to ask earlier, and we kind of drifted inexorably towards Star Trek, as we should. But I mean, how you have so many random table books out there. I mean, how do you come up with so much? I mean, I know they're not super thick volumes, but it must be so cognitively, creatively intense.
Yeah, and it is one of those things where it kind of started with me starting to run some D&D again, and then thinking, oh, I need a table, right? Like I need a random table for this. And it kind of started with that. And just the idea that I know everybody, the easiest way to cut down some of the load on a game master is to have a random table for something. That is just one of the best ways to take some of that load off of your shoulders. Because one of the worst things that I hate is you go into a room in a dungeon and there's the ring that's inscribed with, you know, KMC, and that's what they need to find. And so the first player who says I roll perception gets that ring. And then the three other players say, oh, I want to search the room, and the DM says you find nothing. You know, you find nothing.
Yes.
You find nothing. And I'm like, this is this is like a kill on your player engagement and stuff. So, you know, so you can have a random table and just roll on there. And even if it's a rotten piece of wood, right, you've given those players something, and they know then the next time they go into a room that they might find something in there. And, you know, heck, it might be, you know, 1d4 gold pieces one time. It might be a dead rat. It might be the rotten piece of wood. It might be, you know, a weird plant growing out a crack in the wall or something, but they're going to find something to make that room feel a little bit more real, a little bit more substantial than just saying, oh, well, each room is going to have the clue or one magical item in it, and, you know, or a chest with some gold pieces in it, and then we're just going to move on. You know, but adding things, you know, like a snake in a cage or a love letter or something, just so that the DM can grab onto some of those. I think is great, you know, and cool. It adds a ton to the game. And yeah, you know, and as far as cognitively or creatively challenging, it is, you know, like I said, the first ones really came because I was like running a game and I was like, oh man, I need this one. I need a table for this. I need a table for that. But you know, also, you know, it is one of those things, right? I've been doing it for a long time. So, I, at certain points, got used to, you know, making stuff up on the fly. So now I can just, you know, make it up and write it down. And that way, you know, it can help people. And of course, you know, and of course, I just knew that random tables are something that, you know, game masters and players really want from just back in the day. You know, running D&D. All my players love the random tables. You know, I would sit watching Voltron just rolling on the random tables in the books, right? You know,
Voltron, yes,
yeah, absolutely. And you know, just thinking about the game, or, you know, even next gen, you know, coming out, you know, sitting there watching it, rolling on the random table. And then I just remember back to when I was playing, you know, West End Star Wars. They didn't have random tables. They didn't have a lot of random tables for, for Star Wars. So I had made some, right? I had made some for that. And I just remember being at a session and just like pulling out the random table, and my players are just like, oh man, oh, we're searching the cargo hold of this, you know, this freighter, and he's pulling out a random table. That means there could be some cool stuff in it. And so, you know, that's what just kind of kicked off the random tables. And I you know, I want to make running games as easy as possible for people, because if people don't run games, then where's the hobby go, right? You know, one of the worst things I hear, you know, I hate to hear is like, oh, you know, well, I would love to play, but I don't have a game master, or or we have a couple buddies or a few friends and we want to play, but we don't have a game master. And you're like, well, one of you should run the game, right? One of you should run the game, and then you should switch and somebody else should run the game. But if you think it's hard or something like that, random tables will help you, and they will only help you cut down some of that load, add, you know, some interesting bits here and there to the games. And so that's what I've been trying to do. And I want to make sure that as many people who, you know, who want to can run a game. And so this, you know, the greatest hobby in the world doesn't die out.
You've
very cool.
It was interesting to hear you talk, just because obviously I know your material from making it ease of entry into gaming again. That's exactly how it made it easier for Jason and I to do it. But you brought up something that was very cool to hear, is that, you know, by using them too, you're driving engagement. Like you said, if it's a linear thing and someone gets a gem and someone gets a rock and, you know, someone gets a plant, at least, especially for those that you're trying to get interested in it, making it easy for that GM or DM to be able to drive that. That's just, I'll be honest with you, on my app, I guess I was thinking my epic, I never thought of it that way before. And it actually kind of, it makes me think now about the next time I play, or
Yeah.
I lead, because Jason and I do some duet gaming or whatever the case is, that maybe Jason, I won't kill you off so quickly next time.
There it is.
So, but hey, we're running up on time because I know we told you, I think half hour to 40 minutes. So, and we could go on for hours, and we don't want to impose upon you, but if it's okay, we'd love to have you back, just because we could talk Trek for hours, and I would love to get more into just some of the tables and your experience DMing. We could probably talk hours about your experience.
And not to mention, as I mean, no pressure, no rush, but as novels 2 and 3 come out, it'd be fascinating to just talk about those. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really appreciate you spending time with us tonight.
No, absolutely. Like I said, I'm happy to talk about it. I want more people to enjoy the hobby. I'm interested in your guys' games. I mean, you said, I want to know what you're playing and what you're running. I mean, that's the dangerous question, right? That's always the dangerous question.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that. That's our running joke internally, because we started getting back into gaming, and then it's like, hey, we're having these conversations all the time. Let's hold ourselves accountable. We'll do a podcast, and it's been great. But the little bit of time we have for playing is just completely going right. Like recently, we decided to change our format temporarily to biweekly, just so that we have more time for planning and honestly building the brand and seeing where do we want to go. Right, with all of this, so that we can stay immersed in RPGing and just have fun with it. Someday we aspire to play someday I aspire to play regularly. I know you do too, but I'm speaking for myself. I want to.
I don't sit for hours on end listening to your inane droning on a podcast because I don't want to play.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So, but
we've known each other for a long time, Matt. We jab each other. We just don't normally put it on the podcast. But I had we do. But I will say, going back to some of the things you had said, Matt. Like I think the West End game. I still like. I look at my shelf. I think the GM guide that came out from West End. Is just, I think it remains, honestly, I'm biased, but I really think it remains one of the best GM guides yet to be written. I mean, you granted it's very cinematic, right? That's the thing. We had the privilege last September of interviewing Bill Smith, right? Who and it was just like, it's like talking to royalty. It's like I mean, this stuff is changing so many people's lives, and then you fast forward and you look at all the stuff you're doing with the random tables, and you'll actually, I wanted to mention again, because we were talking about this prior to recording, but for our audience, highly recommended from both Brad and me, the No Prep Game Master, right? Or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Random Tables. And I don't know which of us found this first, but we both, maybe I did this, it was you, but because I read it first. And obviously it's not a long, I actually think I read it in a sitting. I think I sat down one night and I just read through it. And it was really just almost revelatory in like the strength of the argument of, you really don't have to sweat it. And here's my logic for why not. And I have to say that one, it was like one of those books where you read it, you can sit down and read it quickly, and then you put it away, and then you just kind of have to accommodate it over time. And it's like, the more I think about this, the more I go back to this, the more I can see how, this argument is sound. It's especially if you're willing to utilize random tables to take that load off. It's like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And I think we're starting to also see then really first-rate source books that are starting to incorporate more random tables, like from the bigger publishers, not just D&D, but I'm thinking like the Genesis stuff and just the stuff coming out there. And it's like there's more and more random table material that like the publishers are recognizing has value, which is what you've been doing for how many years now?
Since 2015, really.
Right.
2016 is when I really got going. And thank you so much for talking about the book there, the No Prep Game Master, and that was just kind of my reaction, right? Because we're all talking online about the Matt Mercer effect with people having to the dungeon master has to be perfect, but the players don't really have to do anything and stuff like this, and or running of course there are newer games that are kind of where designed where you go around and ask the players what's happening here and stuff like this, but like all that can be done with D&D, right? Like if my player says oh, what's on that island over there, I can just turn that around and say, well, you tell me what's on that island over there, right? Like I don't need to have that whole load on myself. If the island, I wasn't creating the island and I wasn't planning on you to go there, well, you tell me something that's creative on there, and I'll tell you, a lot of times I find that my players are they're either as creative as me or more creative, right? It's not that they're in really any case where they're less creative than I am, right? They're here at a role-playing game, they're wanting to make up stuff, they're wanting to have fun, introduce stories into the world as well. So that book to me was just some of my thoughts in reaction to some of this. And of course there's been even more talk just recently with like a DM shortage kind of thing, and some articles going online and stuff like that, and I chimed in on that a little bit on Reddit and stuff. But like the idea, I had heard a quote, I can't remember who it was by, but they were talking about something else, but they said if something is worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. And that has always stuck with me. I know it's funny.
That's awesome. Oh my God.
But that quote, I can't remember who said that, but it stuck with me because what if running a game that's worth doing, you don't have to do a perfect job. And and then players, right? Like how many players are perfect? How many players, know every single rule about their character? How many players, show up and and are typing on their phone and stuff? It's just like, well, if you're going to run a game, like you can take a time, you can pause the game to look up a rule. I mean, that's frowned upon, but like, hey, if that's what you need to do,
that's right.
Stop the game and look it up. Or make a simple ruling and move on, even if the players are like, oh, that's not the rule. Well, it's just like, then you can run the next campaign, right? You run it, or tell me what the rule is and I'll just do that, as long as you're not cheating, right? As long as you can trust your players. I mean, I want people, and like I said in the book, right, I want people to be able to say, hey, let's play Dungeons and Dragons, or let's play Star Wars, or let's play Star Trek, and no one should freak out about running the game and say, well, I haven't prepared. You should be able to run a game right now. I should be able to DM both of you guys right now.
Yeah, beautiful.
Just making up stuff, letting you guys make up stuff, me adding in, I'll control difficulty numbers and throw situations. You know how your characters work. I mean, we're all friends, we're all work together. And then that shouldn't be some big thing where, a game master or dungeon master is expected to, to prep 8-10 hours outside of a session. I mean, who has the time to do that? Now, if you're a live stream or you're Matt Mercer, well, if I was making, probably north of $40 million a year running Dungeons and Dragons, I'd prepare. I'd have a staff of writers writing stuff, but that's not the case, right? We're, and what case is we're running home from work. We're dealing with, spouses, we're dealing with kids. And then it's like, oh, I got my 2 hours or 3 hours to game. I didn't even get to think about it hardly before we start.
And you want to use the time.
Ease of
but you should still play.
Enjoy the experience,
that's excellent.
And that's what you've been able to do for me and for Jason, is just based off of searching, is allow us ease of entry back into it without necessarily always having to feel like we need to produce critical role type material when it's just us.
If something's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. We're going to
my motto.
That's
that's I've coined that model in 1990.
You really did.
So starting with college. Hey,
Yeah.
thanks.
Seriously.
Thanks so much.
So much,
for your
yeah.
time tonight. We'd
Yeah,
love to have you
absolutely.
back again and talk.
Yeah,
more about
anytime.
this.
Yeah.
Anytime, guys.
Well, like we talked about before the interview, truly a real ambassador of the game. You can
Mhm.
just hear him.
A
He gets a
prolific
real joy out of
ambassador.
playing.
Yes.
Yeah. And I can't remember if it was during the recording or afterwards, but he said something that resonated, and it was there
Big
were
time.
two things. He said
Mhm.
two things. One
Please
was
stop calling me. Oh no,
yeah,
no, that
well,
wasn't
okay,
what
three
no.
things.
Sorry, yeah.
One of them was he loved to hear about our games and what we're playing and how we're playing.
Yeah,
and
that was neat.
and some people might, and I'm not saying any of our guests, some people might just say that out of courtesy. I think you can tell he
Yeah.
actually enjoys hearing about how other people game, if they use the materials, how they use
Exactly.
them,
Yep.
any improvement, where did we think, he could
Mhm.
improve, or what
Mhm.
our opinion is on it.
Yep.
Just we didn't even get a chance to talk really about, and it would have been interesting. We'll have to have him back. How he got into doing the publishing, what kind of work it takes to get it published.
Yeah, we did not go into any of the nuts and bolts when we next time.
Yeah, next time
Yeah.
we will. But that there's this whole thing, and then the other thing he mentioned
Yep.
was
The other thing he mentioned, and it really
when
got
when I'm pointing at you, that means that you're supposed to jump in.
Yeah, smooth. The other thing he mentioned, which I think it made us both pause and then kind of lose it, because it's deep. As he said, and he was citing someone else. He didn't remember who it was, but he passed it on to us, and you all heard it. And we want to really reiterate that in this episode now. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. And on the face of it, that sounds ridiculous, right? Like Brad, you and I are both very much not that way, right? We tend to, when we get into something, we tend to commit. I think certainly for me, and I think for you too, there's the risk of overcommitting. Right? I don't think either of us is very good at. Yeah, definitely. Me too. Right? Who dips their toe into something? It's like, I'm going to do this entirely, right?
Yeah.
And so the notion of, if you're going to do something, do it well. But as we discussed with Matt, that's not the point. His whole notion, as he told us, behind the Random Tables books, behind so much of his creative endeavors and output, like DiceGeeks.com, is and has been, just do it. Just get into it. If you care about it, if it brings you joy, if it gets you going, you don't have to be great at it. Just go do it.
The analogy I thought of after we got offline was like downhill skiing. Okay, something neither one of us has done, as far as I know.
Nope. Cross country, yes. Downhill, no.
Yeah, cross country, downhill, no. If you go in to decide you're going to start doing something, you're not going to start at an Olympic level.
No.
You're going to start. You're going to fall. You're going to be on the bunny hills. You're going to do that. Do you want to do it? Then do it and start poorly and do better. Same thing for, I'm a golfer, have been in the past. Mm-hmm. I've been golfing for 20 years. I'm probably a hair better than I was 20 years ago.
Right.
I could give up, or I could still do it poorly because I still enjoy it. Same thing with gaming. And for me, it hit home because of, I think I talked about this earlier, my own need for preparation. I set too high a bar for myself.
Right.
And then it makes it difficult to game. And when he said that, like you said, it gave pause. Why not just sit down and do it? And if it's poor first time, you learn from it. But how many times have we had, even with my homebrew area, relatively mediocre preparation, but it was still fun?
And I mean, I think that's right. I think, anything takes practice. It takes experimentation. It takes learning. It's not about, oh, I should be good at this the first time. That comment really got me going, and I've been thinking about it since, because we actually interviewed Matt just a couple days ago as we're recording this right now. And I've been thinking about that comment since that point pretty consistently. if you're going to do something, do it poorly. And so I have two thoughts about this, and I think they're complementary, mutually complementary. I didn't say anything when we were speaking with Matt, but for me personally, what immediately came to mind was piano. So
I'll add on when you're done, because it's funny you bring up music.
And I thought about you and guitar, and I imagined having this conversation with you already. I thought about piano. You and I have talked a ton about this. I mean, you've been instrumental in my journey of getting back into music, and as you know, like I basically took 6 months off. Part of that is just because the last semester was just the busiest in a long time. But I basically took 6 months off, and you had said to me at the time, sometimes you just have to do that as a musician. And I use air quotes for musician as applied to me, but still, you're like, it happens. That's just part of it. And that helped. And in looking back, clearly you were right. It was like, okay, no pun intended, but as that time dwindled away, I started getting jazzed to play again, right? And I started sitting down semi-regularly. And then, over winter break recently, this last month, we traveled a bit. And so, like, as we record right now, I think I've sat down once in the past 3 or so weeks, and I'm starting to, it's just, settling back into the schedule and everything, it's starting to itch again. But to bring it back to this notion,
that's when you use like a analgesic cream or a zinc based.
Yeah, perfect, good. We'll just click that explicit button.
Okay,
so I had to censor all the things I want to say. So stand by, operator.
I can see it shorted.
Yeah. Click. Okay, clear. So this notion of, if you're going to do something, do it poorly. I was thinking about that today in the car about piano in my life. Of the whole point was to go and have fun and learn it and experience the joy of it. And this isn't something like as a major life goal. Like, I'm not going into piano, right? I think, like, when it comes to things like work, school, whatever, then no, you're not going to do it poorly. You're going to do it as well as you can, big picture, knowing you can, quote unquote, do the little pieces poorly along the way, because that's called learning.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I think, we could go on. I mean, that whole topic in itself is interesting, because we both know. I mean, you don't go to school, grade school, middle school, high school, college, graduate, postgrad. Yep. You don't do it because you know it already.
No.
You go to you go to learn because you don't necessarily know it all already.
Yep.
And the one thing I've learned from you over years and years is none of us, you, me, our friends, all 5 listeners, anybody, we never stop learning.
No.
It's one of the reasons I find interesting. I think we did it ironically when we had Jim Johnson on. I asked him what was on his desk and what he was reading.
Yes.
And he was reading, and I cannot remember. It was.
He's like a sponge, and he's so prolific. He's reading and writing so much constantly.
Yeah, but he's constantly learning. We're constantly learning. Independent of gaming. I originally came out of high school with scholarships to study music. I was going to be a classical horn player, and I decided to do that. And decided to adopt the, if you're going to do it poorly model for my college career up until my latter 20s.
Well, but in all fairness, that was perhaps because the do it poorly model, you had seen that as the whole model, not part of the
yes.
Yeah, so
that's true.
That's important.
But the point is that we're always learning. Anything we're going to do, music, me picking up my horn again and starting to play in my 40s, or picking up guitar in my 40s, or us learning to play to GM or GM. We're going to start this, and we're not going to be perfect. We aren't going to be Twitch worthy. Heck, we were barely podcast worthy in terms of our gaming excursions.
Jury's still out.
Yeah, I think the jury came back in as guilty, not worth it. But but the point is that I think him making that comment and him talking with a passion about making it accessible to everyone, and the way he talked about gaming, like going from dungeon room to dungeon room and giving something to everybody. That was
great.
There was
yeah.
I never, how simple is that to make it intriguing for those PCs sitting at the table to just throw them a bone.
Yep.
Even if it is, what was it, a rotten wood bone?
Yeah.
Rotten piece of wood. Because that creates engagement.
Yeah.
And that drives interest and excitement about gaming.
Yes.
So
yeah,
that was
those
were the things. It was a cool conversation. We could have kept him on, much like all of our guests. We could have kept him on for hours, and he was willing to do it.
I was going to say that was really neat guy. Looking forward to having him back.
Yeah.
Well,
hey,
we
go to the GM, I just told you.
Yeah, I was going to say we should probably walk over to the GM corner. Yes.
So, what has been on your desk lately, post New Year now?
Yeah. So, it's not on my desk yet, but I'm hoping tomorrow. I meant to pick it up today, and then I was most of the way home from seeing a friend for coffee and realized, oh, I forgot. And then the bookstore was closed. You and I actually were talking about this the other day. I think I'm going to pick up a copy of the first Expanse novel.
Oh,
you're reading
Lake.
it.
Yes.
You're reading it right now, yes?
Yes.
Yep, Leviathan's.
I just started.
Okay.
But you mentioned it.
Yep.
So I paused it.
Oh.
Because then I figure we will probably read at different velocities.
Awesome. Yeah.
But I figure I've joked with you about us having like a book club episode where we pick a book. We don't read it during it, but we talk about it.
Yes.
But I thought even if we don't necessarily talk about the book on here, I thought we could read it at a similar.
Oh no, thanks. That's great. I will definitely pick it up tomorrow. I meant to do it today and I forgot. My local bookstore, shout out to Next Chapter in St. Paul, Minnesota, wonderful place. They have a copy or several. I have been intrigued by the basic backstory of The Expanse. For a few years, I heard an interview with the two authors on Planetary Radio not more than a year or two ago. It's COVID years, so I don't know if it was 5 years or 2 years ago, but I think it wasn't all that long ago, and they were so interesting, and they talked about, because the guest or the former host Matt Kaplan, he was a real fan, so he'd read the books, and so they were talking about the basic notion of this is, in my mind, it's near future because it's not like out by Star Trek time, but I realize it's not technically, but we're talking solar system colonization, and I find that very provocative, always have. And this notion that you've got the Earthers, right? Because we've got Earther 3d6 dice, as said, and I've been wanting to use those. And so you've got the Earthers, you've got the Martians, and you've got the asteroid belt, you've got the whatever. I've been thinking about this on and off for a while, and then you had mentioned you were reading it, and we started talking about it, and I'm just gonna, especially now that you've paused the reading, I'm gonna pick a copy up, because I think I've been reading a lot of nonfiction lately. That's usually what I do. I finished the book I had picked up on our travels.
It's not going to be a light read either.
No, I don't think so. I know I'm not looking for light.
Yeah, no, I know you're never. And jokes aside, you never really are. You don't necessarily look for light reading. You are someone who likes to challenge yourself.
Well, so. I want to be intrigued and entertained. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've read books that are lighter, but no. So that's good. So no, that's what's almost on my shelf, Brad. It will be there in the next day or so. Leviathan's Wake, first book of The Expanse. I just think I had to, kind of like we're talking about, if you're going to do something, do it poorly, really. I had to give myself permission. I know this is a little compulsive. Had to give myself permission. Just read the book. You don't have to be interested in the series. Just read the book and enjoy it. So that's what I'm going to do. What's on your desk?
Oh, I already told you. I have mine. I'm holding until you get it. I've been working through the original. I'm working through the first book of the Dune trilogy, the original trilogy.
Oh, excellent.
So those were the two books that were on my
talk about not
table.
light reading.
No. So I'll pause Dune when we switch over.
Sure. Okay.
I have the ability. I tend to. I taught myself to speed read years ago.
Yeah.
And the problem
That's right.
I have with books is I have to consciously and actively teach myself and keep myself in check to read slowly.
Yeah, and get it
and get it
and enjoy it. Yes.
rather than move, because
Yep.
I move fast with material
And you can't help but miss.
No, and I tend to get 90% of it, but it's that last 10% with fiction that you don't want to miss.
No, agreed. Absolutely.
And the reason I did the Expanse Book 1 is because as part of, I don't remember if I talked about this last week, but
I don't think so.
As part of my Christmas purchases, I picked up Green Ronin's The Expanse RPG.
Oh, you had mentioned that. That was another thing that kind of motivated me to reconsider The Expanse.
And because it is a 3D6 system, and we have been
Yep.
really engrossed
Yep.
in 3D6 with our modern age project that's kind of hanging out there that we want to do.
Yep.
But that, and this is one I kind of
Oh, and I'm so, if I may interject,
Yeah.
thanks to Troy and the gang at Green Ronin just for keeping us in the loop.
Yeah.
We love their stuff. Great people.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, I have The Expanse and I have Modern Age sitting upstairs because of some of the stuff that we're doing. The one that has been on my desk literally the past couple of days since we talked with Matt. Unusual game. I picked it up at Christmas time from Modiphius. It's called the Spy Game.
Yeah.
And unique perspective, it is. I remember growing up and for a while playing a really rudimentary tabletop game with the old James Bond RPG, where it had all the characters from Bond. This is not the same game, but the idea of playing a spy. And so if we're going to do something, do it poorly. We'll just do a one shot.
I'm in.
I figure we'll look at schedule. I'm setting a hard date. I'd like to try to have us do this next week or next weekend. Not this coming weekend.
You let me know.
But next week or next weekend.
You let me know.
It's based off of the 5e mechanic. And it's a role-playing game of, I'll read it here. This is Spy Game, a role-playing game of international espionage, secret infiltration, and cinematic action as you create an original character, your agent, to save the world from the other mercenary agents and government organizations that hold plans for their enemies. So, different than anything any game that we've
It's
done.
funny because I just watched with my wife, and was it both of the girls? They wanted to watch it. The girls wanted to watch it. The sequel to Knives Out.
I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen the first one.
Oh, and my wife did not like it. I did. Part of it is it's a unique role for Daniel Craig.
He's really quite a good actor. It's really funny. It's a cute movie.
That's what I've heard. I mean,
yeah, it was funny.
You're not gonna be intellectually challenged per se, but it's entertainment. It's good.
No, that's right. That's right.
So that's what's on. There's more, but that's for another week.
All right. Well,
that's what I'm focusing on.
Again, Matt Davids, thank you so much for joining us on Dice and Mind. It really was a pleasure. We're looking forward to talking to you again and to using so much more of your material going forward. Everybody out there, as always, thanks for listening. Be well, stay well. We will see you in 2 weeks and with more announcements. Bye-bye.